Okay. So yeah, like Jill mentioned, we met at an STC conference, and just give you a little bit of my background. Um, my background has been in technical writing, knowledge management, and consulting. And of course, when ChatGPT launched a couple of years ago now, I had to really rethink a lot of things. I was in the business of providing technical writing staff, consulting on workflows for content creation, managing content. And it turns out, of course, generative AI is all about content, right? And so what I think's so great now is I get to speak to you guys, this audience that's in learning and development, that is also a lot about content, right? So there's so many opportunities to leverage this. So I had to realize early on, I needed to change a little bit. Um, so some of you may be familiar with the Who Moved My Cheese book. Back in the 90s, I came across this book, and it had, at the time, it hadn't resonated as much with me as it does now. Really having to rethink my career, the direction of my company, the impact of AI on my field, what it meant to my employees, clients, all of that. And so I came back to this book and just found it as a useful guide, but really just summarizing some of these things. And we'll get into the agenda here in a minute. But really embracing it, right? I feel like there's a camp out there that may be rejecting it out of hand, right? There's a fear factor involved in some of this because there's a lot of uncertainty. But in this is also a lot of opportunity, and that's the perspective that I take on it, and that's what I'm going to share with you guys today. Being proactive, so anticipating that change and really preparing for it, rather than sort of waiting for it to happen. Letting go of that fear, because we generally have a fear of the unknown, right? We're comfortable in the status quo, and not knowing exactly what this technology and where it will bring us can be kind of nerve-wracking. And then keep moving, just continuous movement, continuous exploration and growth. So again, times are changing. So just an example of that, right? So I asked ChatGPT, to write me a little meme envisioning what scribes may have said about the Gutenberg press. Right? So there's some parallels there. So I use ChatGPT to tell me, to give you some little fun anecdotes here. But this one was kind of interesting. If it's so easy now, any commoner can get a copy of the Bible. Imagine that. The press can make 1,000 copies, but can it replace Brother Theo's immaculate footnotes? Have you seen his scrolls? So, you know, you know, we we're all proud of the work that we do, and we invest a lot of time and effort into creating this content and sharing it with our audiences. And we should definitely be proud of that. What I've learned and what I'm going to share today is not an approach where it's going to replace things, but it's really a tool that helps augment our skill set, and actually a tool that can really unlock a lot of creativity and new ideas that I think is going to really move us forward in our industries. So really, I see the opportunity for us to up level, right? Our skill set uniquely positions us to be able to sort of lead the discussion and be a big part of the discussion at our various organizations, right? So our ability to manage information, to disseminate that information, our understanding of the tools and technologies that are used to facilitate that, all of those things uniquely position us to be able to help there. And another, excuse me, an important part is, we're actually gatekeepers, right? A lot of us hold that ability to publish content and information, right? But I really see this as an opportunity for us to sort of shift over to an area that we've all been responsible for, but it's more important now. But we start to look at ourselves as sort of curators of truth, right? We're vetting information. We're working with our SMEs. It's going to become more and more important for people, our audiences, and our clients to be able to understand and really trust the information that they're seeing. when so much content can be generated now that may, not be factually correct, maybe misleading, maybe biased. Um, our job as gatekeepers, I think, is going to become more and more important. And forgive me if my voice kind of cuts in and out. I was talking to Jill about this morning. I wasn't sure I was even going to be able to talk today. So please forgive that. Just a little disclaimer there. So before I kind of get into this, so just kind of go over the agenda a little bit today. I like to start at a very high level. I don't necessarily like to assume that everybody knows and is familiar with the various tools and concepts. So I like to kind of get us all on the same page. We've got 70, 80 minutes, to kind of go through a lot of these concepts, but I want to reserve the majority of that time for actually demonstrating how prompts can be used and how these tools can be used to generate new and exciting content, new and exciting words, really, if you just break it down to that, right? And combinations of words. That's really all it's doing. Um, and also reserve a good amount of time for an exercise that we'll get into, some hands-on stuff, and then breakout sessions where we'll talk about how we're using AI or the experience we just had with some of the prompts that we're going to use in that exercise. And then I'm going to kind of wrap things up kind of at that higher level, sort of that organizational level, the prompt curation, right? And concept of libraries of prompts that can be used and shared, curating those, and also potentially building communities of practice, much like this here, right? And the STC and, a lot of those other industry groups out there, but facilitating and becoming a part of the discussion about AI within those, but then also potentially creating those communities of practice within your own organizations. So before I kind of dive in a little further here, Jill, Luke, any questions, comments, or concerns? Because I just go. We're good? Thumbs up? Okay,
We're good.
great. Okay, so let me kind of hide this here. So there are a lot of tools out there, right? And there are new tools coming online every single day that do anything from creating images to creating text to analyzing data, creating code, Python, HTML, all of that. Also music, voice. There's so many, but the thing is, it's all content. And what's great, I think, in an L&D context in particular is you guys can use a lot of creative imagery, right? You can use music, right? Where in knowledge management on my side, where I've primarily been working less, sort of less on the creative side. So I'm a little envious that you guys have that opportunity to leverage it there. And I'm sure a lot of you have been using it in a lot of those ways already. But as of recently, ChatGPT has over 200 million weekly active users, and there's over 2,000 generative AI tools out there available on the market. This is just a small handful of some that do some interesting things. Um, Google Gemini, I'm sure you've probably heard of that, ChatGPT, Perplexity. These three, I think, are probably the most well known. There's Meta, Llama is their model. But then over on the image side, there's Midjourney, Dali, a few others, Photoshop, and Adobe Firefly, to name a few. And there's also video creation tools out there like Runway, which do some pretty cool things. So we won't by any means have enough time to kind of go over all of those, but um, I think that one of the key themes and concepts here, if you take anything away, is explore and try to break things, right? A lot of these have just free accounts that you can go in. Some of them are accessible, like Google's AI, just by going to their website. So I encourage you guys to all check those out. So we're going to talk about a few of the concepts again at the high level. Concept of AI intuition, prompting and prompt engineering, the concept of prompt chaining, hallucinations, and the importance of human verification. So I won't spend too much time on that first slide there. But so AI intuition is really kind of honing that ability or skill to start to recognize ways that you can use AI, right? I think oftentimes what I'm seeing, some of my clients within their enterprises, they'll roll out an AI system and say, okay, go be productive, go save some time, right? But it's not necessarily intuitive that, well, how to use it, what it can do, what its capabilities are. And the best way to do that is really just experiment, interact with it. Ask it things that you don't think it would be able to formulate valid responses to. Ask it to help you do what you're trying to do, sort of up leveling and kind of thinking higher level about some of the potential and possibilities. So, I mean, it's a lot like a black box, right? Many of us probably have Alexa and Siri and OK Google and that sort of thing, right? We are not intuitively aware of all of the things it can do, right? And we'll stumble upon things, and sometimes we'll be like, "Oh, I wonder if it can tell me the weather over in London right now." Oh, I guess it can. Um, so it's more a matter of just recognizing those opportunities, and when in doubt, just try it. Explore, try to break it. And so identifying those professional use cases, right? So in going in and using these systems, even if it's, at a creative level, an exploratory level, you're going to come across things that it can do that you can apply professionally, for sure. So part of what we're going to do today is a little exploration there and kind of working with prompts, getting different responses, different results, and kind of testing those things out. Collaborate, network, joining communities of practice like this and having these types of discussions, but also thinking ethically and critically about it. Anytime there's a technology out there that can do things, there are going to be people who use it nefariously. And we, being kind of the keepers of truth and gatekeepers there, have the opportunity to be able to ensure that the information people are getting from us and our organizations is ethical, and that we've worked through biases, and that we're just responsible in using that. And a big part of that is having a discussion within your organization about what that means at your organization. What does it mean to look for biases in AI? What does it mean to think ethically about it? How we use it, environmental impacts, all those sorts of things. And that can become part of your AI use policy or mission statement. Start small and scale. Excuse me, one of the things maybe I don't mention here, and this is in the intuition kind of area, but there's a statistic out there that 80% of AI initiatives within enterprises don't make it all the way through to production. And I believe a big root cause of that is they're not starting with the end user in mind. What is the experience that we want these people to have, right? And what makes that sticky, and why is it important? So asking those questions up front and really keeping the end in mind, rather than if you build it, they will come kind of concept, right? Where we want AI, we've spent a lot of money on AI, we have these systems, they're available now. Now go use them, right? It's like, no, it's a little backwards. And that's why so many of them, I think, fail to make it through to production. Also, I'd say, don't boil the ocean. If there's a specific area that you're most interested in, whether it's images or music or video or creative writing, focus on that and go deep there rather than necessarily trying to stay in front of all these things. I kind of equate it to trying to stay in front of the internet in 1998, right? Like all of the web pages there. Well, what's out there? I don't know. It's going to be impossible, right? There's going to be so many use cases and ways this is used that there's just no way we'll be able to keep up with it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about prompt engineering. And we use the Tracy prompting framework. Prompt engineering is really that way of telling AI systems, giving them context so that they can give you back valuable responses and results, right? The polar opposite end is just saying, hi, right? Who are you? What do you do, right? Or simple queries. This model, and there are a few, I'll show you a few others, really gives a framework for giving the AI system context. Here's the task that I'd like you to do. Here's who I am, right? Here's who I am. Here's what I'm trying to do. Here's my situation. My boss wants this by Friday, right? A sense of urgency, those sorts of things. The role, right? So if you imagine this whole corpus of knowledge and information these systems have been trained on, giving it a role and saying focus on this area helps kind of focus its attention to certain sort of disciplines. Um, the audience, tell the systems, who the information is for or who the output is sort of geared towards. Maybe adult learners. It may be internal audience, maybe an HR department, right? So giving it that context so it knows sort of who it's writing for or speaking for. Um, and then, what you'd like it to create and how you would like that output, right? So you can say things like format your response in a table, an ordered list, in HTML, right? So telling it how you would like that result back and the intent, actually what you're trying to get out of it. So the task, the role, all of these sort of things play together to give that system the entire concept of how it can help you. And I think if anything, understanding these components um, will help you build that AI intuition, right? It's not necessarily intuitive to say, I need to tell a system who I am and what I want, right? And what my deadlines are and constraints and all of those things. But learning to kind of think that way, um, is a real skill, and this will definitely help you with that. So just quickly, I wanted to, and I'll be going back and forth between the presentation and um, the various systems, I think quite a bit. Let me see if I can hide. Can I hide that? Oh, good. There we go. Okay, so this right here is a prompt builder that we created just using the Tracy model. And what's great about this is an assistant in ChatGPT that we trained with specific instructions. And I'm going kind of deep here, but this is more just a matter of saying, here's some of the things, the capabilities, the possibilities, right? So given instructions that tell it, who it is, what it does, what the Tracy model is, who the audience for that is, a good example of those sorts of prompts, and then some knowledge and information that it can refer to when it's formulating its response. So that's kind of behind the scenes. But so what I've tried to do here is make it very simple to say to have AI help you use AI, right? So again, that's kind of thinking outside the box a little bit, but I'd like a prompt that will help me define my audience for an internal training on HR, something or other, whatever. And then you just say, you make it up. So it's going to try, right? So with these systems, for lack of clear instructions, it will give you something. It will give you anything, right? So the more clear you can be, the better response you're going to get. So here's a prompt that it's written using the Tracy model. Identify key characteristics of the audience for an internal HR training session, improving employee engagement. So it made it up, which is great. I could ask it, say, give me 5 examples of things, and then say, let's use that. The role, you're the world's best HR trainer. What's interesting, and this is a little tip kind of thing, you tell it it's the world's best, and it kind of wants to rise to the occasion. It's kind of funny. Who the audience is, develop a detailed audience profile in the intent, right? So this is literally something now you can copy and put into any other system, and it's a prompt. I've just skipped over to Perplexity, You just said, okay, here's the prompt, and now it's going to go through, and Perplexity does things a little differently here. Um, but it goes through and it's researching these things and going in. And again, for lack of more information or context, it will give you something. But what's great about these systems is if you have additional context that you are at liberty to put in there about who your audience is, um, deadlines, constraints, and so on, it'll just get more and more concise. So this is just a quick example of leveraging AI to give you an output. In this case, prompts that you can create and use and reuse. So back to the presentation here. So here are just a few other prompting frameworks. I've analyzed these actually using ChatGPT to basically find they all have the same components, right? The task, the role, context, goal, all of this is really pretty synonymous. But these are just a few other examples that you can potentially leverage. So applying AI to content creation, the like HTML translation. You can convert content written in plain text and other formats to HTML code, right? So asking for different outputs, right? It'll write Python script for you. I I used to wake up every morning and I'd have a new idea on what I wanted to try. And one morning I woke up and I was like, I wonder if I can use it to write Python. And then like, I don't know anything about that. So just kind of starting at the beginning, just saying, I'd like to try to write some Python code and run it on my computer. Where should I start? Right. And just starting there and having it walk me through, well, figure out what you wanted to do and then what type of system do you have and so on. And within 2 hours, I'd written a Python script. I had identified a free Python tool that I could run locally. It helped me troubleshoot errors and correct code. And I was able to take spreadsheets and put them in there and have them parsed out into multiple text files. It's like, wow, so just being able to use it in that way is pretty crazy. So you may be able to just drop in some of your content and just say, convert this to HTML, apply the style standard, this CSS, use this template, those sorts of things. Um, it's really helpful. It can suggest organization of content. For example, you may drop something in there. It might be a training file, something like that, and say, or just paste the text in there. Say, hey, look at this, and now paste in potentially the taxonomy or file folder structure, and say, recommend maybe where this should be stored, or recommend tags that would align with this, given this set of options here. Writing to length, you can tell it, hey, give me 500 words on this. Okay, now shorten it to 200 characters. Style guide adherence. So many of us, of course, have worked within style guidelines and pulled together these style guides that our teams and maybe others within the company follow. But leveraging that and having it do quality checks against or adherence and checks against those style standards. And I'll show you an example of that here in a little bit as well. SEO optimization, just tell it, act as an expert in SEO. Look at this content and recommend ways that I can enhance it. I'm going to kind of skip over some of this because I want to save some time for demos and whatnot. So the concept of tokens. So before I get into this, Luke, do we have any responses from the poll that we can share out or look at real quick here? I want to see how deep maybe I should go on some of these concepts or so, or how high level.
Well, we ran the poll a little early, so we only got 12 responses.
Oh,
But
come on, guys. Come on.
well, the
We're not
it
looking at our phones, are we?
it only shows it for who was in the meeting at the time we launched it, so it only
Oh,
showed for 12 people. So I learned
oh, well,
something new about Zoom today. But
can we
here are the
relaunch it?
results. Oh, I can definitely
Oh,
relaunch it. Here, let me relaunch it.
okay. Yeah, let's relaunch it. But just quickly there, it said like what, 58% of those that took that use it some at their work. So yeah, go ahead if you would just click on this poll and give a couple of seconds here. And while you're doing that, let me just keep going and we'll revisit here in a minute. But tokens and the concept of tokens. So tokens are how these large language models break down text. And each of these tokens have specific IDs and numbers associated with them. So these large language models can look at them and say, okay, statistically here, given the context I've been provided and these set of numbers, how can I arrange a response using this other set of numbers and tokens that comes back and should be relevant to this person? So it's basically these systems are breaking down these words into numbers and then bringing them back. So the reason I think this is important is because many of these systems have limitations around the number of tokens it can take in, number of tokens it can provide back. So let's kind of keep going here. All right. So context window. This is the large language model's ability to recall and remember the discussion thread and context that it's already been provided, right? So if you imagine as you're going through and having a chat or a discussion, a dialogue with these things, the larger context windows will remember things further back and take those into consideration when it's providing you new responses. Smaller context windows, it's only going to remember things from maybe, a couple of responses back. And why that's important, especially professionally, is, we can provide a lot of context. We could provide a whole novel worth of context and have it actually recall and give you responses based on that context. So I'll just skip forward here to give you an idea of just how far things have come within just over a year. We've gone from Claude that had a context window of 1,000 tokens that roughly equates to about 75,000 words to October of last year, Gemini giving a 2,000 token context window. And that's roughly equivalent to the stand, right? I mean, actually, it's three, excuse me, I think it's three times. It's as if you put in three Stephen King novels and it can give you responses back based on all of that. So you can imagine kind of the power that that brings, especially when we're working with large amounts of text and content and having it give you results based on that or insights into that. So for example, maybe, excuse me, maybe you input maybe you export a lot of the text from training materials that were historical, going back 5 years, 10 years, and you drop all of that into text files or Excel spreadsheets and so on. You can take all of that and drop it into some of these systems like Google's Gemini and ask questions about it, have it organize it, have it come up with ideas for new topics, help it identify gaps. Now, it will hallucinate, and we won't probably talk too much about hallucinations. I'm sure they probably come up frequently in the concept. But, leveraging it to identify things like gaps, it will always give you a response, right? And sometimes it'll give you 10 things that's just like, whatever, doesn't make sense, not going to use that, so on. But for every 10 things you may ignore or that may not pertain, you might get one really good gem. And I've actually found the opposite. I'll get 10 gems and like one that, but worst case scenario, you get one new idea or one thing you may not have otherwise considered. That to me is the net gains, that the efficiencies that it's bringing our teams. That ability to gain a different perspective, insight, or paradigm very quickly on something that maybe you've been doing for 20 years. And it's like, oh, I didn't think about including a section about that. Or here's a different approach to this kind of exercise. That's up leveling. That's where the real gains come. How are we doing on time? I want to make sure. Uh, I will go into this. So context building. This is really bringing the AI system along for the ride, right? It's because you may not be able to include all of the context you need in just one single prompt. You can start with what are APIs, for example. Maybe your objective is to document APIs for an AI powered software product or any other kind of software product. Start really high level and say, hey, what are APIs? What are the best practices for documenting APIs? Are there special considerations for documenting them for this certain kind of software product? Now, given the context above, the things that we just discussed within this context window, write me an outline for an API document. And I'll guarantee you, if you take some of the things that you've done in the past, some of the work maybe you do every single day, you take it through this process, you're going to come up with a new idea or something you hadn't considered. So great as a sounding board in that respect. So given the context above, complete an outline. Now you can provide additional details where the tendency may be, here are the details, write me an API document, right? That's probably where most people's brains go first. But if you bring it along for the ride and build the context and then provide your specific details, then you get to that generate a draft for the first section, the second section, the third. And I think it's important that we maintain the use of the term draft, right? And look at everything that comes out of this as a draft that needs to be reviewed, vetted, and go through the normal processes. I think we're all in trouble if we just start trusting things that come out of it, you know, without revision, right? Because it will get that good. The output will sound so convincing because it sounds so professional. It sounds so well formed and thought out that I hope we don't reach that point where we just always assume that it's correct. And again, that goes back to us becoming sort of those gatekeepers of curators of truth. Okay, I'm not going to get into prompt drift other than to say these models are changing. Your companies and businesses you work within are using a certain model now and may change that or upgrade or update it later. So if you've got a prompt that you've created that's working really well today, it may give you different or slightly different results, 3 months down the road, 3 years down the road. So really evolving and maintaining and managing that prompt over time to ensure that it's giving you the desired output is a way to kind of combat that kind of drift. Hallucinations, for lack of clear context, it will give you something back, right? We often look at those as it's just making things up. Well, it is, but we may not have given it the context it needed in order to give us a more valid and valuable response. Okay, so into the demos here. I guess I'd like to open up for questions before I kind of get into any of the demos. Do we have any questions maybe queued up?
We have one that I think is kind of getting at how the tokens and word counts are defined. And that was from Becky in the chat here saying, does the King novel count repeated words, and assuming Gemini count is for unique words? So I think the question really is, are tokens and word counts taking into account repeated words,
Mm,
or is it unique words?
repeated. So it's looking at each of those words and their proximity to other words around it. So if a word is being repeated over and over again in paragraphs or in chapters and so on, um, it's taking them in the context of the adjacent words, if that makes sense. It wouldn't necessarily say, okay, this word is used. Well, I don't know. Honestly, that's a really good question, but it is looking at the context in proximity to other words. So it would not necessarily rule them out further on down, but it looks at it all as the whole. I hope that answered the question.
Becky says thanks.
Oh, good.
Okay, we have
Score.
another one now from Eric. Do you have any suggestions for identifying hallucinations when prompting for results with which you're unfamiliar? For example,
Mm,
hypothetical science or medical events and potential outcomes.
yes. Context building. So, starting really high level and saying, hey, um, explain this discipline to me. Within that discipline, what are some of the best practices there? What are some of the pitfalls or things that are maybe overlooked that I should consider um, if I'm writing about that or working in that industry? And then you've built this context and you've had the system define for you the things that it should consider when it's giving you its response back, right? So it using it to sort of check itself as well. So once you have that output, you can say something like, now act as a skeptic, in that field or discipline and analyze this output and tell me um, what information may be inaccurate here or misrepresented. So again, you're trusting it to a degree, but the point there is maybe it comes across one thing that you're like, oh, yeah, no, that went the wrong direction or a different direction, right? So it'll kind of give you that area of focus there. So using AI to provide you context that'll help it give you a response, but then also using AI to sort of check the work. Um, and that's kind of the best way that I think I've found. Although, and I won't get into too much detail here, but AI's got me in trouble a few times. Um, in areas that like law, that I'm not as familiar with, right? We always have to be somewhat skeptical of what comes back. And I've got a couple of anecdotes. If you want to talk about any of those things later, I can tell you about that. So transforming content. So just quickly here, some of the use cases, unless there are was there any other question? I think they're really useful.
I think that is all.
Okay. Definitely, if you guys have more questions, put
Oh,
them in the
oh, we
chat
just got
there.
another one. Can you limit the tool? So I assume that's, any AI, generative AI tool to only internal documents like complex process instructions. Yes.
Yes and no. The various tools that you have available to you within your organization, or I guess if we're talking about tools that have been rolled out within a certain organization or company versus these broader tools like ChatGPT, those that are internal there, they would have already put in some tighter guardrails around how they can or should be used. Um, and also what information it may have been trained on, right? So if they're rolling out a tool internally there, a custom model, and they take some internal documentation, they could use that to actually train and give that model more context about your business, your industry, and so on. And that's going to sort of change the output there on one level. The second is sometimes they'll offer you the feature where you can point it directly at certain directories or files, um, and have it give you responses that are specific to that. So in that way, yes, you can limit it there. And then finally, some of them give you the ability to just drop files in, right? So if you've got a small set of documents that you want to provide as context, you could say, hey, I've just provided 5 documents about this subject or topic area. Go through and review them and give me a report. And now you can work off of that context there as well. So yes, you can limit it, but I say no. On the flip side is it may have already been trained on things outside of that context as well. So it's going to take all of that into consideration. So one of the things that I'm a strong advocate for as a consultant when I talk to my clients is getting a general use tool like ChatGPT or Google Gemini that has not been trained on all of the specifics. Because I think oftentimes it assumes that we all need to work within certain constraints. But without those constraints, it starts to give you broader broader context that we can use across tasks, across disciplines. We're shifting gears every day, doing different tasks and different things. Newsletter, this lesson plan, this group of this audience, and having those constraints can sometimes be a detriment. Okay, good questions. All right, so to give you a couple of demonstrations here. So this right here is this is Google's AI Studio. This was actually free. It's just aistudio.google.com. You can actually go in here and create APIs and all kinds of really cool stuff. But just to demonstrate this 2 million maximum token count here, I dropped in this full Apple style guide document that I found online, 181,000 tokens. Drop that in, and I asked it to, oh, what did I ask it to do? Maybe it doesn't show. Oh, here it is. Yeah, so I asked it to, I had to revise it here and say, wait, did you do what I asked? But looking at it and providing me a brief description so that I can include it in my knowledge base so people know what the file is before they click on it. So you can see kind of elements of that Tracy prompting in here, like what I'm trying to do, who the audience is, what the purpose is. And then I asked it to write individual cheat sheets for each major section of that style guide. So it went through writing inclusively, units of measure, style and usage. So you can kind of start to see how providing a lot of information or a lot of tokens in a system like this, you can have it give you some really good output. Now, again, this is a draft, right? So, we would want to run that by a subject matter expert if we're not the subject matter expert or owner in that. But the beauty of this stuff is it gets us to the 10-yard line, right? To use an American football term, right? It gets us most of the way there, and we're able to bring it in that last 10 yards, right? And it's pretty uncanny how accurate it can be when you do start to put it in front of SMEs. In any case, so this may be a cheat sheet that I can then use and share among my team. And you can also see that you can start to drop content in there and say, okay, now check it against those guidelines. Give me a report formatted in a table that outlines which, sort of requirement or gap that this may have. And again, it's going to give you some information, and it's up to you to look at it and say, oh, this is valuable, this is valuable. Nah, ignore that, this and this and this. So that's just one really powerful tool there. Style guide checker. So I'm going to switch over to ChatGPT. So here's an example where I did take that style guide and the cheat sheet, and I put it into ChatGPT, and I created an assistant. I don't get any kickbacks from OpenAI or anything like that, but you can go in and create custom assistants there. And I think many of your organizations may have actually provided you that ability as well. Ask, say, hey, can I create my own custom assistant, right? But what's great about these is you're basically caching context that you can use and reuse over and over again with a prompt that are instructions that is basically a prompt, who you are, what you do, typical interaction flow, all these things. And then you can provide it that context that it can use over and over again. So now you can do some cool things like, where did I go? Here we go. Let's pick on Amazon. So in this case, I'm just going to take a chunk of content from the Amazon help site. And I thought it'd be really interesting to see, what would an Amazon FAQ sound like if it used and followed the Apple style guide. So I like to do speech to text. Take a look at the following example of an FAQ, apply the style guide standards, and give me a full report formatted in, in table format. All right, so then I just pasted in all of this content, right? Again, this is where context windows start to matter. You may have pages and pages. You may have files that you want to drop in. So here we go. Formatted as a table, original text, style guide alignment, updated text.
Hey, Jason,
Yes, sir.
as that is loading, can you answer Rebecca's question about the difference between Gemini and Google AI Studio?
Yes. So Gemini is more of a commercial name or brand. The AI Studio, but it's also a model. It's a large language model. The AI Studio itself is where you can kind of go next level with it. You can go in there and start to create reusable prompts and instructions. Um, you can create APIs that call into some of those things. You can start to create assistants that maybe you could use on your support site internally. It's more of a developer type portal, I think is the short answer. If you just go to Google these days and you do a search, L&D best practices, you can see up at the top, it's using Gemini now to actually put together an AI response. So I'd say that the difference is Gemini, the word is a branding thing. There's a commercial application of it, but it's also the large language model. And that studio behind the scenes is more of a developer type portal that you can use for all kinds of things. Okay, good question. So let's see how it did, right? So I didn't tell it, to rewrite it in the style of Apple. I told it to give me an assessment of like if it were going to, what would it change? So this is another kind of example of a precursory step that you can consider like context building. Um, there's no tracking information for the missing item. Customer service will assist you. Avoid redundancy. Clarify actionable steps. Then, if tracking information is unavailable, contact customer service for assistance. Third-party sellers. So you can see it went through the style guide and found some things here. Key changes applied. And then it says, would you like me to do a specific section or so on? And I'll say, apply recommendations and create updated draft. I basically said, hey, do all that. But I could have said, hey, give me a numbered list, right? And then I can say, okay, apply recommendations 1, 5, and 7 and create a draft, right? So you can kind of, because it has that context, right? It's like, oh, okay, I know what 1, 5, and 7 were. Now I'm going to apply that. So here's the updated draft. Find missing items from your package. If you've received a package and an item from your order is missing, may have been shipped separately. Visit your orders for details. Find a missing item shipped by Amazon, shipped and sold by a third-party seller. You can see it's already organized it differently, and it's using different terms and so on. So now I can say things like format in HTML. So it'll give me that exact same thing, just formatted within HTML, headers, body, and so on. So a lot of us work within these systems, of course, that will accept HTML or will accept Markdown. Now consider I've just rewritten something in a new voice and tone and style, and had it give me the output in HTML in this case, and I may be able to just copy and paste back into that other system and continue to edit. That's some really good efficiencies. So I'll just let that go. And then here's another tool, Perplexity. This right here, if you are concerned about being able to track sources of information, Perplexity does a really good job showing you where it's getting the information from. I believe behind the scenes, I think it uses the Meta Llama model, but I could be wrong. Don't put me on that. But if I go and do the let's see here, research the latest trends in adult learning. So it'll go through, it's breaking that down into subtasks. And what's cool about this, you can go in here and say, okay, what were we could look at the logic. It's searching, emerging trends, latest trends. It's reading the results. It's gathering the sufficient information. And then it's showing you the sources it used, all of these, and then the answer it came up with. And it cites them in line, right? So kind of combating some of the hallucination type stuff one of the participants earlier mentioned, if you're unfamiliar with a certain subject matter area, this is a good tool to go in. It will cite the sources. And you can say, hey, dive into this source more deeply and summarize it for me, right? Build this section out. Well, let's just do that. Build out section 3 and dive deeper. Oop, put depper. So it gets it. You could do some pretty sloppy writing, misspellings and so on, and don't even worry about it. The stuff picks it up. It knows. Hybrid and flexible learning models for adult learners. Core features of hybrid learning, blended modalities, flexibility. So again, ideas, right? This is all about exploration. A lot of this, probably applies, but there might be a couple of gems in here that you could dive more deeply into. So Perplexity as a research tool and citing sources is fantastic. Okay, so those are some high level examples there. Any questions about that? Any questions to get caught up on at this point?
Eric asked if ChatGPT would accurately provide sources if you asked a follow-up.
Yes. Yes, actually. So it's in a recent release, they're actually doing better, right? They've got to, of course, compete with these, but I'll ask it the same question. If I go back to the top. So now ChatGPT, I'll just go out to a blank session. And this is their latest model, ChatGPT o1. And there's Mini, which is a little faster and so on. If I go here and I ask, it's now got this web search feature. And I think with o1, that's not available, but we'll just put this in. So it's thinking, it's breaking it down. It thought about it, and here's microlearning, bite-sized content, and so on, right? So with this newest model, see, it didn't provide any references or details. But if I go to this 4.0, which is the previous model, and then I'll start a new session with that. I want it to clear the context window. That's something worth mentioning as well. It's sometimes valuable to clear the context window and start a new session because you don't want it to reference what was in there before, so that you get a clean sort of answer out. So in this case, with the previous model, you can go in and look at, okay, well, here's a source that it used for that. And you can say, search the web for more information on number 4, personalized and self-directed learning. So now it's going and purposefully going and doing more of a web search to dive deeper there. So yes, I guess short answer is yeah, it can. And you can say, give me the list of sources in MLA style and guidelines, whatever. So you can start to see kind of the value in this, right? We all need to and should be citing our sources in a lot of cases. Why not ask it to do that for us?
Jason, there was a related question wondering if Perplexity's citations impact its hallucination rate, or does it just hallucination cite things at a similar rate?
Oh, that's a good question. The general consensus out there is that Perplexity does a good job in providing responses that have fewer hallucinations. The reality of it is, it's pulling things from the web, right? And it's not inherently correct. all the time. It's not inherently non-biased, right? So again, it's going to do the best it can to provide you correct information to the best of its knowledge of what's out there. But I think Perplexity does a really good job. They're also, well, actually, here's another one I didn't mention, but Claude is another large language model out there, and they have a directive at the very highest level as part of their mission to provide clear information that's socially responsible. And so they try to fold that into everything they do. So that might be another one to look at. So they're part of their charter is to try to minimize misinformation. But yeah, I'll go through it real quick.
While you do that, I just want to mention also that Jason, for a session that I had, Jason made a GPT for me
Yeah.
that would debate the the value or the validity of learning styles. And that was an example of setting something up to really point at specific content
Hmm.
and draw from it. And so it's just another use that's kind of a cool thing to think about.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
And I do want to mention that it is 11:35. So we've got 25 minutes left at this point, just to give you a little time
Oh,
check.
well, you can see how excited I get about this stuff.
I
Like
understand.
I talk about it all day, every day. So let's fast forward a little bit. I think understanding prompting, understanding the capabilities, understanding the tools that are available out there. If you take nothing else away from this, that's going to give you, I think, good value. But we're going to go into some of the actual prompts. I won't get into these examples here as much, but we're providing the deck, I believe, in the recording to attendees as
Yes, we
well.
are.
And I'll provide it in PDF format. But yeah, so let's get fast forward here. So yeah, so a little exercise here. We'll try to actually maybe we'll combine both the exercise and the breakout sessions into one because you said we have what, 20 minutes left, and we also want to leave some more time for questions.
Mhm.
So I'm going to provide in the chat a playbook. Uh, that it's an L&D playbook. It's got a number of prompts in it that we're going
Luke
to
just provided it.
use.
Yep.
Oh, you did. Good. Thank you. So if you'll go into the chat, you can download the playbook. We put these out pretty, I think, once a month for different subject matter areas. But it's a collection of prompts that you guys can copy and paste, use, customize to your various needs, or if nothing else, kind of just give you an idea of what's possible there. You can share it with your teams and so on. But for this exercise, I'm hoping everyone can just pick one of these and go into whatever tool you guys use, whether it's an internal tool or ChatGPT, your personal account, whatever. Just copy this prompt, paste it in, and see what kind of results you get. So I'll give everybody about 5 minutes to kind of play with that, and then for any of you that are open to sharing your experience, either learned through this exercise or generally, that's really the point of the breakout sessions. I don't think we're going to have time to facilitate breakouts of 50 plus people between now and the end of the call, but we can have more of an open forum where individuals can share what they've learned from this exercise. So go ahead and take 5 minutes. I'm going to take myself off video, put myself on mute. Also, if you've got any questions or if anything arises during this, please feel free to put those in, and we'll reserve some time at the end to go through some of those questions. All right, 5 minutes starting now. Okay, I think we'll continue on here. So I'm hoping there may be some individuals that might like to kind of share, sorry, share some of their experience with kind of free forming, going through here, maybe customizing these prompts. First off, hopefully they look like they may resonate or may be useful or something you can use. I'd be curious to say, if they're not, right? Like what else might we be able to do or create? I'll just open it up. Luke, maybe you can help facilitate if somebody needs to talk. Raise your hand.
Yeah, if you'd like to share, if you can go ahead and raise your hand, and then we'll call on people who've raised their hand, and you can come off mute and share what you've learned.
Okay, and if not, we can do questions as well, and we can start to explore, other systems, applications, and so on as well.
Rebecca, looks like you might
Yeah,
like to say something.
I actually have. It's very interesting that I ran this through. I ran the prompt through both um, AI Studio, Google AI Studio, and Gemini Advanced 1.5, and I got two very, very completely different responses.
Right.
So it's, but I know very well that if you put the same, um, even within the same model, if you give the same prompt multiple times, you'll always get different responses. But it's very interesting to see how very different they are. So
Yeah,
that's one thing I
absolutely.
noticed.
Yeah, that's a great observation for sure. Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that yes, if you by design, these large language models have a degree of randomness, right? Which is kind of a blessing and a curse, right? If you want a consistent output every single time, it's a little bit of a curse. But from a creative standpoint, um, having it give you different approaches and different answers, well, the spirit of the answer should remain the same, but the sort of context and presentation of it, the information may have changed. But yeah, definitely between various models, you'll see a lot larger difference. It's a really good observation. Okay, any other questions?
We have in the chat, um, I think it's Jamie saying they hadn't thought of putting all the different parameters in at once. And have typically used shorter prompts. So appreciates that example of
Yeah.
kind of putting all of that in. That makes me think of too, and I think you covered it somewhat with your Tracy tool, but just the idea that you can go into like Chat GPT and search, you can explore GPTs and you can find a GPT that helps you make prompts,
Yeah.
so you could start with a short, like what you've used, Jamie, you could start with your short one and use the Tracy prompt builder to build something more specific
Mm,
and get what you want still faster.
yeah, absolutely. And along those lines as well, I mentioned that for these AI tools or assistants, they have the instructions in there, right? Um, and those are prompts. So I researched the best practices for writing system instructions for AI assistants and um, had it write instructions that where I could create an assistant that will write instructions for other assistants, right? It's a long stretch kind of thing there, but in the end, essentially, I've got an assistant that can help me write instructions for assistants, and that's why I'm not trying to say, Jill, it was easy for me to create you that custom one, but like I went in and I said, here's what we're trying to do. I'm trying to do this for a friend that's presenting this to this audience. Write me an assistant or instructions that I could use that she could use for her effort. So went in and created it and doctored it up and sent it to you. Thanks, Jason. What, it only took you a minute? Oh gosh. Oh
I
no.
still
But
appreciate it.
uh, all right. Well, unless there's any other questions, I can kind of get into some of this closing stuff here. We've got 12 minutes left or so. But I did want to talk about the concept of prompt management program, right? We all manage information, right? We've got file folders, we've got SharePoints, we've got, knowledge management systems and so on, all of which, have specific features that help you manage content. So um, the point I like to put across is that we should start treating prompts as content, right? It's just a slight paradigm shift a little bit, right? But these are texts. These are bodies of information that can be used, reused, shared, maintained, archived. Like the whole life cycle of content can apply to prompts. And when you start looking at it that way, you can apply the same skills and methodologies that you're already using, to store, share, revise, your learning materials and other knowledge. So one of the things that we do, and we've developed this product called Do Easy AI. We use it ourselves, but we store prompts in there for all various disciplines. We've got over 1,100 prompts. We've got dozens of assistants and agents and workflows and so on. And it also contains knowledge that each of them can use and reuse and so on. But this is not unlike many of the systems you guys may already have for storing knowledge or information, right? So if you just kind of carve out a section of that for a prompt library that you can use to share and refine over time, that's definitely a good practice to have. We're all good at applying guidelines and templates and things like that as well, right? So if you consider those best practices around creating prompts as part of that in managing that program. And again, coming back to one of the concepts we talked about earlier, right, which is we're all very uniquely positioned within our organizations to lead the charge, to realize some of those gains that the company's trying to get through AI. And a big part of that is, hey, maybe we're managing and storing the prompts that are being used across the business, and facilitating the workflows there and keeping them current and training people on how to use them and training them on AI and what can be done. So yes, so that creating a community of practice as well. There are likely already like AI committees and work groups and things like that within your organizations, but taking it a step further and start to look at opportunities for building skills, helping individuals who are interested, advancing their skills in that place, rewarding contributions, all of those things that make up a good community of practice, facilitating discussions. I mean, it can be a pretty powerful thing. So I'll just quickly say, so Revo, my company, we do consulting. We host discovery sessions like this for free. They're 45-minute sessions where if you want to introduce this type of information and some of the things that you've learned to other members of your team or company, I'm happy to come in and just show that in the hopes that maybe we might be engaged for training or workshops or even some custom consulting there. I also mentioned the product Do Easy. It's one that we've built. We haven't yet launched it. Try not to turn this into a sales pitch, but it is something I'm really excited about. I've developed it just looking at some of the gaps and opportunities out there with AI. Try to pull things together into one place that can intuitively help move workers forward. So let's kind of turn it over to some last minute questions. We probably have, let's see about how much time we've got. About 7 minutes.
And I'll just quickly add to what Jason had said, that Fredrickson and Irevo are also able to partner. So if you are thinking about a training need and that involves AI, it's training in AI, or it's creating training using AI, wanting to figure out how to use AI in your training processes, things like that. That is something that we would be excited to partner with Jason and colleagues on.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love that
Yeah.
opportunity.
Mhm. Thank you for the thank yous, folks. Does anyone have any other questions about anything that was covered today, or anything beyond it that you were interested in learning about? Gary. Oh, the widget called AI Ready is it's available. So you have to pay for it. It's a subscription. It's kind of like a tool. But it's from a company called Artha Learning.
Okay. AI ready?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, Jason, if you've never met Garima, you might like to connect with her.
I'd love to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll share my LinkedIn out on chat as well. I'd love to connect with any or all of you. I love talking about this stuff, talk about it all day, every day. So please feel free to connect. Again, it's community of practice and um, staying connected
Okay, we
there.
would love a session on AI governance, addressing grassroots and top-down best practices. All right. Thank you for that input. We'll see what we can do to make that happen sometime this year.
All right. All right. I just shared out my LinkedIn. If anyone's interested there, one last little plug. If you guys are interested in Do Easy, just go to doeasy.ai and you can sign up for early access. And yeah, I really appreciate everybody's time. Hopefully, you've taken some things away that you can apply, and love to keep the conversation going. So feel free to reach out.
All right.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Luke. Thank you,
Yeah,
Jill.
let's give a big hand to Jason. Sorry, usually I do that at the end. I don't know what happened to me. Thank you,
Mes
Jason. Big
Thank
virtual
you.
applause.
Yay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me. Anytime. I'm welcome to, love to come back.